Hey everyone, I'm Norm. Welcome to Breaking Back, a tennis podcast by fans, for fans, covering all aspects of the game with an unfiltered lens. And I'm here with my co-hosts, Peter and Chris. Welcome to Breaking Back.
Welcome to Breaking Back, presented by Portland, Maine's Lone Pine Brewing Company and their new Juice Punch Hazy IPA, now available in all distribution markets. Visit lonepinebrewery.com to find it nearby. Juice Punch marries juicy hops with a silky malt to present a hop-heavy, plush, and playful punch. Lone Pine's also recently released a Summer Light Sweet Citrus Ale and a Slay All Day Pride IPA. And last but not least, they also have recently launched a Lone Pine Vodka, which has been our unofficial beverage of the summer, with Lone Pine Vodka plus lemonade with watermelon ice cubes, which I highly recommend before fall gets here.
I just have to say plush and playful punch again.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It's really good. And it is
playful.
Outstanding. My mom, who listens to the podcast, hi Mom, she really appreciates the fact that we're overtly drinking in the studio here. And she listens for the smacking of the lips.
Tell her we're being on brand.
We are being on brand at all times. Joining us today, dear audience, is Nathan Roach, Senior Category Manager for Tennis at Adidas. Nathan grew up in Reno, Nevada, and began playing tennis at the age of 6. He played competitive junior tennis as a junior in Northern California, as well as tournaments across the USA and some international events, ITFs, in Germany. He was the 1997 5A Nevada State High School tennis champion and went on to play collegiate tennis at the University of Portland. Nathan has been involved in tennis in some capacity for most of his life, both personally and professionally. He worked for NBC Sports as a production assistant at Wimbledon and the French Open during college, served on the board of directors for Portland Tennis and Education for more than a decade, which is a nonprofit that helps underprivileged children learn the game of tennis. Since 2010, he has worked for Adidas Tennis in a number of different roles and is currently the Senior Category and Sports Marketing Manager for Adidas North America. Nathan, welcome to Breaking Back.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me.
So Nathan, tell us about what your role would be at a tournament on the heels of the Olympics and Wimbledon and the French Open. Do you happen to attend any of these Grand Slam tournaments or tournaments in general?
Yeah, I attend pretty much most of the bigger tournaments in North America and the U.S. I have gone overseas, as I mentioned before, in different capacities when I was with NBC to Wimbledon and the French Open. I've been to the French Open for Adidas a couple times, but actually just getting ready to head out to New York on Monday. And while there, I really kind of put my sports marketing hat on. So we do our athlete product distribution. Obviously, as you can imagine, it's the epicenter of tennis in North America. So there's lots of meetings going on, but it's a little bit of everything when we're at any one of these major events. And first and foremost, once the time comes, it's really about servicing athletes and then having industry meetings. That's kind of where we're at when we're at the U.S. Open or any of the other ones.
Best of luck. Safe travels to New York, and we'll be rooting for you and all your players there over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Can you say where you're staying?
Well, typically we stay in Midtown, which is kind of where all the action's at, easiest accessibility to the site. Our Adidas office is actually located in Hudson, which is where we do our athlete distribution. And so in the interest, this year is the first time I think I'll stay in Soho as opposed to Midtown. Just getting around back and forth from the office is a little bit easier than trying to hop on over to Midtown. So once the tournament starts, we'll make the move over to Midtown. In fact, most of the time when I go, I'm usually there the week before, and then usually the first 3 or 4 days of the tournament, again, watch a little tennis, have some meetings. But yeah, it's a great time. Everybody's sharing that same love of tennis when you're in New York. So between the athletes, the industry partners, the fans, it's always a good time.
So I think for people listening to the podcast, they would love to hear what you mean when you say athlete distribution.
Absolutely. No, I think the easiest way to describe it is obviously these athletes are bouncing around darn near 52 weeks a year. They're not going to carry all their product with them, and quite frankly, we wouldn't want them to because we have them wearing different outfits throughout the year at different tournaments. Everybody that watches Australian Open and French Open and Wimbledon, US Open, see our athletes in different outfits. And so essentially what we're doing is we're distributing the product that they will wear for that tournament as well as maybe a couple others. For example, when our athletes go to Wimbledon, they obviously pick up their Wimbledon whites, their grass court shoes, but they also get their product for the US Open Series to bring with them because they're on the road so much. It's impossible to try to ship product to every location that they're at. So we give them a bag full of goodies. We obviously meet with them, talk a little bit about what sort of initiatives we've got. We also do photo shoots at a number of these different events. So we'll shoot some of our athletes in New York in future season product. So it's kind of a little bit of everything. But from a distribution standpoint, it's largely making sure that The athletes have all the product they need to compete, the latest and greatest product, and then we send them on their way to hopefully make it deep in the tournament and have everybody see what they're wearing.
So like my day job is I'm a producer in the commercial and marketing world, and I've worked agency side, production side, post side. Is this the time of year, or the time of the tournament, I should say, when you'll be coordinating with your marketing agency partners and their account executives and producers to get the photo shoot done of the shoes that are coming out in 3 months, that kind of thing? That's when all of this takes place, correct?
Absolutely, exactly. So we're doing a little bit of all of that, working with agency partners to, both agency partners that are helping us currently, right? So any activations that we're doing on the ground right now, any events, activations we're doing around the US Open. And then, of course, we've got our other agency partners that are working on the photo shoots, to your point, about product that's in the future. So obviously, we'll peek behind the curtain, but, we're shooting our athletes in product that no one's going to see for another 6 months. And at the same time, we're always getting feedback from our athletes on product that they're going to be wearing in the future, how it's working, what they'd like to see. And that's all part of the athlete interaction. But going back to the agency side of things, yeah, these are big moments for the brand and big moments for our partners.
Tease us a little bit, Nathan, if you can, on what's some things we should be looking for, the fans should be looking for at the US Open in regards to color schemes. Is there a PMS color of the year or whatnot? Or what type of things can we be seeing your Adidas athletes wearing at the US Open?
Yeah, I think you'll see it shortly. Actually, you'll see it. It's already out. I'm giving you a peek behind the curtain, but you can certainly go to adidas.com and see what they're going to be wearing for the most part. The cool thing about the process by which we create kits is you're working with a variety of different people, right? Long in advance, 18 to 24 months, talking about what the color of the future is going to be, what the brand color is going to be. So there's two components to it. There's typically colors that have a red thread throughout the brand. So if you watch the Olympics at all of our athletes were wearing shoes that were black with hits of yellow and pink in them. And there's certainly colors that are more specific to our tennis category. So for example, at the US Open this year, we've got some really unique silhouettes with some hits of purple, white, and black. Some really cool product, especially on the women's side. No, nothing against the men's stuff. It's really great, but there's some really fun women's product. And, the US Open especially is kind of a marquee moment for us in the US. If you look to last year we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Battle of the Sexes and Billie Jean King and Title IX. And so we were celebrating Billie Jean. And part of that color collection was blue, right? To go along with the blue suede shoe that she wore during Battle of the Sexes. So there's these moments where you celebrate either the colors of the time, so that would have been Billie Jean's, and then this year, the colors of the season. So there's a variety of different ways that we can look at it, but this year's collection is really cool.
Are you going to capitalize on the current lifestyle trend of the multicolored Sambas that are littering my daughter's closet at the moment?
And
gazelles and whatever. Yeah, is it the gazelle or the Samba or both?
The Samba's on fire right now. The Gazelle is doing really well. The Campus is making a strong comeback.
It is, yeah.
But yeah, those three in particular. And, it ebbs and flows. A couple of years ago, it was Stan Smith. Everybody had to have a pair of Stan Smith.
Right.
So, you certainly capitalize on those trends. And I think something that's kind of fun about tennis trend right now is this idea of core tennis, right? You're seeing a lot of tennis product being worn beyond just the court. It's a style, especially on the women's side, not even being a tennis player, but you're wearing a white pleated skirt. And, look at Zendaya in her, in Challengers, that movie really kind of helped elevate that tennis inspired look. So we're always trying to find ways to capitalize on those, but, trends are moving so quickly right now. So, it's not as easy as just striking right at that moment. You got to see 18 to 24 months in advance as to what's going to be the next hot thing.
I was just at Wimbledon, Nathan, my first time there, so it was a little bit kind of like walking in with my head in the clouds. But as I went in, I had on my freshly polished Stan Smiths, and who did I walk by as I walked into the tournament? Stan Smith himself. I nearly lost it right there. But
he's a great guy. He's one of the best partners we've got. I've had the great opportunity to work directly with Stan for the full time I've been here, and he's as nice as they come. He is an icon, and his sneaker's timeless. So, it just doesn't go away.
So one question I always have is, you mentioned it takes 18 to 24 months of advanced planning on these kits. I always look at Australia as the beginning of obviously the tennis season, but in many ways it's the beginning of the fashion season. And I look for colors that are kind of ubiquitous across that event, because I know they're going to show up everywhere else in fashion through the balance of the year. So how does that...
You're going to talk about how awful they've been so far
No,
this year, right?
I'm not going to say that. But how does that happen where Adidas and even your competitors are all working with the same kind of color swatches, right? In some capacity, right? There's a little, if it's green, then there's like different types of green across the different manufacturers, but it seems to be an annual thing where there's consistency.
Exactly. It's, and that goes back to what I said about there's colorists. Their job is to see into the future, essentially, of what's going to be the hot color 24 months from now. And you're right on. There is many times where there's an overlap, and a lot of times that'll let you know that you got it right? Because if other people are doing it, not to pat any of our competitors on the back, but like if other people are doing it, then you've hit the trend. If you look at Australia, for example, like we always kind of everybody refers to as the happy slam. A lot of times in Australia, that's where you're going to see some of the brighter colors, the more pastel-y colors, because it's affiliated with, sunshine and warmth and all that stuff. And so, yeah, to your point, it is funny sometimes. Since I've been here, there's been times where I see competitor product and I go, oh my God, like that is really close to the same, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But then you got to start looking at, the silhouettes and the different cuts and the different design features. And that's what, that's where you start to separate yourself, even if the colors are the same and on trend.
I thought I saw nothing but yellows and greens at the Australia Open, and aren't those their official
Well,
colors?
that's
Green and
Australia,
Yeah.
Australia, excuse me. Yeah, green and gold.
Yeah.
That's
and we,
every
light
brand
blue,
had their version of green and gold.
Yep, exactly. And every brand has a little different mark on it too when we do have the same colors. But there's definitely been seasons where for us too, where we have been completely different in terms of what our competitors are doing. A lot of times that happens with collabs, right? When we do a collaboration with someone else, years ago in 2017, I think it was, we did a collaboration with Pharrell Williams. That wasn't as much about the seasonal colors as it was about the design element. And that, those are points in time at tournaments that completely differentiate ourselves from a brand, no matter what the color of the season is.
Well, you seem to do a lot of collaborations like that. You have Pharrell Williams, Stella McCartney.
Historically, we've done Y3, but I think, collaborations are extremely popular within, not just tennis, but the industry in general. I think you're seeing a lot more of that. You're seeing collaborations with, less household names, which I think is really unique. We are rooted in sport, but, we have a very strong style element to it. So like we've done collaborations with South African designers like Tebe Magugu or, Rich Manisi or, a number of different Mary Mecco. And those are just tennis specific. So as a brand, like, we embrace collaboration. And I think that a lot of times that's what can set us apart.
Nathan, let me ask you this. You're talking to Three Stripe fanatics here, and the nostalgia with your brand to me is a whole nother level. I was a soccer player growing up and wore nothing but Sambas and Gazelles and Copa Mundials. And to me, those shoes are sort of the standard when it comes to football. But in regards to tennis, Lendl's, the Lendl Supreme, I think it's now rebranded as the Tennis Super OG. To me, I look at that shoe and something about the colors, it takes me right back to Lendl and Becker. And there's something about that shoe that draws out another level of nostalgia. Do you have like a Stan Smith for yourself or a Rod Laver or a Lendl Supreme shoe that provides the same amount of nostalgia for you or your coworkers or the folks at Adidas?
So for me personally, like since long before I was at Adidas, I was a Rod Laver guy. I think I counted the other day just because I was cleaning my closet. I think I have 25 different pairs and colors of Rod Laver. Like that was always a go-to. Now, Rod was before my time in terms of playing, but from a nostalgia purpose, when I think about what I watched as a kid, you hit it on the head. Edberg stands out to me. I distinctly remember exactly the apparel that Edberg was wearing. And in fact, we've brought that back a couple times. We've done some sort of relaunches of it, a capsule collection type of stuff. And every time I want all of it. So I think that that's the beauty of tennis is, it's very cyclical, right? Stan Smith, it's nostalgic. And then, every decade or so, you bring some of that stuff back and, it evokes those emotions from when we were kids.
Yeah. And as a Lendl fan, as I shared by email, like that was not an easy position to defend as an American tennis player when all of my friends were McEnroe fans and loved like his image and the Nikes. And I was, had posters of the gear, the shoes. I missed those shoes. The Barricade came close, but man, that OG Lendl was just money. I felt like that was worth an extra few games in my matches.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it too. If you just look at all the iconic shoes that we've had in tennis, within the brand, some of the most iconic shoes we have are tennis, Stan Smith, Rod Laver, the Lendls, even Groff had a signature shoe for a short period of time. Billie Jean King. Fun fact about Billie Jean King, her blue suede shoes, that was the first colored tennis shoe ever created for a signature player because color TV was just, really coming around. And so we created that blue suede shoe. So there's There's just so much iconic footwear that's rooted in tennis across the brand.
The black rod lavers. I bought a pair of black rod lavers. Were the first shoes that I started to wear with suits maybe 6, 8 years ago, and people started to wear, running shoes or athletic shoes with their suits. And I'm like, where was this when I was a kid? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Where was this even like 15 years ago or
Yeah.
20 years ago when I was even working in a professional environment? I mean, a little different situation here and culture here when you're walking around Adidas. I mean, you can kind of wear whatever you want, but the best thing is just looking at people's sneakers. Like there's a plethora of them
Oh
here.
my God, I can't even imagine.
Well, sneaker culture now is just, off the hook, right? I mean, Fanatics decided, the CEO, Ruben, after going to a Comic-Con said, well, why aren't we doing this for our merchandise? And they started their own show based purely on engaging fans. And I've been to some of these sneaker cons where kids are walking around with wads of cash and stacks of, of shoes and just doing like hand to fist trading. And it is the most amazing thing to see. I love it. And I guess a question I have about the players is how involved do they get in, design? Like say a Tsitsipas or Zverev, one of your leading representatives, like do they get involved in the creative process?
Yeah, I mean, certainly from top to bottom, I mean, performance is king, right? When you're at that level, your first concern is how does it perform? And they are very involved in play testing, long out to give us feedback on how the shoe is performing. And that's the pinnacle for us. I mean, certainly they're involved and they give feedback on, what they like, what they don't like in terms of looks. But it always starts with us at performance. But from a design element, I mean, certainly when we're creating, when we have created signature shoes, both in this category in years past and certainly in other categories, athletes are very involved in the process of how we, create footwear.
Nathan, who are some of your current, brand ambassadors? I think it's Zverev, Tsitsipas, Wozniacki, maybe. So shed some light on who your current ambassadors are and then what Adidas looks for in those said ambassadors or conversely does not look for in regards to personality or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple of our partners, Stefanos and Zverev and Caroline. Great to have her back. Obviously, Angie Kerber just retired. So, Jess Pagula from an American standpoint, Alex Mickelson from an American standpoint. So we really try to have a really balanced portfolio of some athletes like a Caroline that transcends sport. I mean, that's the best case scenario is if you can get an athlete that can transcend tennis like Caroline has, and she's, swimsuit edition and everybody knows who she is on the street. That's a huge piece of it, but you also want a good partner, a partner that believes in your brand. You want long-term partnerships. You find balance between, excitement and performance, and you have to find that. And you also have to have a little bit of everything, right? So you want some players that have a little fire on them, maybe some might say controversy, but then you have more of like a steady Eddie. So you really want to try to have the most balanced portfolio that you can. At the end of the day, because we're a brand, rooted in sport and performance, we want to win. And so, you're trying to look for the next great champions, which, is not always easy to do. Sometimes it's easier than others, but, we are heavily invested in making sure that we have a strong, young portfolio and a junior portfolio so that we can help identify, those next champions.
What about your competition these days? Market share, et cetera, the Nikes, the Ons of the world who seem to have taken a bite out of some market share, the ASICs of the world. How much of an eye do you keep on your competition these days?
Well, I probably wouldn't have a job if I didn't keep an eye on,
Right.
on the competition.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, I would go back to, certainly we're always paying attention to our main competitors, the folks you just mentioned. But I think really what I'm paying attention to the most right now is niche brands, non-tennis brands, right? They're really entering this space. It seems like everybody wants to get a piece of tennis, goes back to that core tennis, whether it's, true tennis performance product or tennis inspired product. All these niche brands are really starting to crowd the space. And, that can make things challenging. We're still one of the behemoths in the industry, but we're having to be a bit more nimble because there is a lot of brands too. And I'd say historical brands, that are creating some really good product. If you can't look at your competitors and, say they're doing a good job and challenge yourself to do better, then you're not going to get better. And so certainly we're always paying attention. I'm surprised at some of the brands that I thought were gone, quite frankly, or irrelevant, that they've come back strong. And, I think that that's also a testament to the talent in the industry. By that, I mean, There's a lot of talented designers and product managers that do switch brands. And so you see kind of a flux sometimes in, product and market share and who's winning at that moment in time. But, we're right there. We're always right there. And we have the luxury of being Adidas. So, but we always have to keep an eye on everybody else. But from a competitive standpoint, I certainly always wanted to beat the player that was at their best. That's when you know that you've won, and so not to say that I don't root for competitors like Nike to slip and allow us to kind of take advantage of it. But we've always been trying to get back to that number one market share. We've had it before many times. You mentioned the Barricade. I mean, for a long time in the early 2000s, the Barricade was the shoe. We had number one market share in footwear because of shoes like that Barricade. So I think the focus remains the same. But yes, do we pivot sometimes to take advantage of that? Yes.
Do we want to bring up the pickleball effect? We want to address that at all?
We can't not bring up pickleball, right? And plus, I guess to segue for a second, having grown up in that part of the world, I'm an anti-pickleballer because I'm a purist. But
the whole show is anti-pickleball.
I think it originated in like Washington or Oregon, right? Didn't the sport start out there?
Bainbridge, Washington in the 60s. Yes. Yeah. So not far from where I'm at. That is exactly where it originated from. Look.
See, that's how much it sucks. It's taken that long to get popular.
Here's the thing about pickleball. And I've learned to embrace pickleball because the momentum is undeniable. Yeah. The growth is undeniable. And if you ignore something that's growing that much, then you're going to miss out on opportunity. Do I still prefer tennis over pickleball? 100%. But do I see the billions of people playing pickleball and look at their feet and look at what they're wearing and say, hey, there's a business opportunity there? Of course I do. So I think it's a fine balance between tennis purists like myself. But I also think that I'd like to believe that pickleball is a bit of a gateway to tennis. And, what we know about the statistics of pickleball is actually 40% of pickleball players are also tennis players. 60% are brand new to pickleball, never played a racket sport.
Right.
But if they can live harmoniously together. And there was a long period of time that still exists where organizations, like ITA, the Tennis Association, was talking about how do we squash pickleball? Yeah. And they finally had to learn how to live harmoniously together because it ain't going away. So I think that it's challenging, but at the same time, it's a business opportunity. And if you're in the brand of making money, then you've got to embrace it to some extent. And I think that, it is here to stay. It's not going away. And in fact, as a brand, we're making hard goods. We're making pickleball paddles. We're making good product. We're making footwear, for pickleball. So, that's what we have to do. You could say that there probably a lot of people would say that about a lot of sports that, in the world, like, why would you create product for that? Or I don't like that sport. But at the end of the day, like, it's a sport and we want to make sure we're creating the best product for it.
Yeah. You've got padel, right? Coming in hot from the Southeast and going north. I know I can't wait to get on a padel court. A lot of people in the Northeast play paddle in the winter.
Yep.
And I just think it's kind of like the rising tide that lifts all boats for racket sports when they're all doing well, as tennis is, right? You talked about your past in podcasting, and we started this podcast because we frankly just didn't like what we were, getting from corporate mouthpieces that are out there covering the sport. And now you pick your head up and, Andy Roddick and John Wertheim have, their podcast. You've got
Jack
Curios.
Sock's got his podcast.
Sock, right?
The new
exactly.
podcast with Sock and them is great. Yeah, absolutely.
It's all fantastic. And I think it all kind of feeds, one feeds the other. And it's just great to see the resurgence of the sport.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned padel, which, now there's a sport that I have an absolute blast playing. We have a couple padel courts at the headquarters in Germany, and you got to drag me off of them. When I was down for the Miami Open, we went out and played padel for a couple hours. That's a sport that, from a personal standpoint, that I can just 100% get behind. You hit it on the head. Padel is the fastest growing sport in the world. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the U.S. Padel is the fastest growing sport in the world. And as a brand, we have number one market share in other parts of the world in Padel. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're ready for that to come to the U.S. because it's coming. And in the next 2 to 5 years, like here in the U.S., you're going to see a whole lot more Padel courts. And as a brand, we actually also manufacture Padel courts globally. So we work with a partner globally that manufactures the entire court. We built one for Messi at his house in Miami. The German national soccer team, when they come to Germany to stay and train at the Adidas headquarters, they love Padel so much that we built courts to make sure that we have them there.
That's amazing.
And so, that is a sport that I think, and, for what it's worth, there's a lot of opportunity there in footwear too, true, high-end performance footwear that stretches beyond, maybe some of the Padel footwear that's being created. So I think that, that's the sport that I'm excited about.
And I guess Talk about how the potential crossover between different sports. And I'll use like Dirk Nowitzki as an example. I mean, Adidas, lifelong Adidas guy, but he's a huge tennis guy too. I know he plays a lot of tennis, like when he's not still involved in basketball, but are there opportunities or have you considered opportunities where you use leverage sports athletes from, say, soccer with tennis, basketball with tennis, or vice versa to really, plant the seed and grow the brand?
Absolutely. If you look at like Patrick Mahomes, he's invested in a professional pickleball league team. So he's part owner in, professional pickleball team. Leo Messi, huge padel guy, right? Supports padel, has been involved in, global padel activations. So I think you look at that. Give an example most recently that I think has just launched is Stan Smith. We just did a cycling shoe, a Velo Samba a Stan Smith cycling shoe. So I think you see all sorts of really cool crossover products. And you also see all these athletes that are embracing, these other sports, which I think is great for marketing.
The Stan Smith cycling shoe is kind of
Anthony Edwards, isn't he
next
an Adidas
level.
guy?
Yeah.
He is. So, if you look at our portfolio, beyond tennis, we got Pat Mahomes, we got Leo Messi, we got Ant Edwards, we got Noah Lyles, who just won the 100-meter. We got Julio Rodriguez from a baseball standpoint. So, we're pretty loaded in terms of that sort of global iconic presence.
Do you still play tennis yourself?
I do. Yeah. I'm playing more now than I was probably when I started here at Adidas, ironically enough, considering I've gotten quite a bit older. But we were on the wait list for our tennis club for a number of years and just got in a couple of years ago. So I'm back playing, a couple times a week, which is great.
And do you play singles or doubles or both?
Doubles mostly.
Yeah.
I've always been a doubles guy since college, so I just kind of stuck with it.
I'd love to see how you gear up for one of your tennis matches. I bet the court is lined with bags and boxes.
Certainly no shortage of product. I have that luxury of having all the latest and greatest product, which is also one of the best parts about working in product tennis merchandising is once we get the samples for future seasons, I happen to be a sample size in footwear and apparel. And needless to say, sometimes those walk their way out of the building.
Nathan, I used to work for the Detroit Red Wings and the Columbus Crew. And if I could pay my mortgage in Adidas gear, because you get more gear, obviously, that you can't necessarily buy, at a Dick's Sporting Goods or at retail. Good stuff.
Absolutely. Some of the best products that I've gotten have been samples that never made it to market. And you're like, these are pretty cool that nobody else has.
So my last question for you, Nathan, is you mentioned the colorists who are tasked with seeing into the future, to inform styles at a future slam. Where do you see tennis in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think tennis is only going to continue to grow. The pandemic was, for all things considered, the pandemic, as you guys know, was great for tennis. The growth in tennis has boomed since the pandemic, especially amongst young people that had to get out of the house, had to do something, and it was a great social distancing sport. That's a phrase that probably still haunts all of us. But, I think that it reignited interest. You talk about pickleball. I'd like to hope that pickleball can have that gateway into tennis. And I use, younger kids as an example. Pickleball is an easier sport for kids to sort of learn how to swing and hit the paddle and then hopefully move into tennis. I think that to me is the best option. I think tennis continues to be more accessible. I think it's hopefully, it's traditionally been viewed as a country club sport, as has golf. And if you just look at sort of fashion trends, even with golf, and some of the stuff that, people like Jason Day are wearing out on the golf course with Malbon and that sort of it's a much different view of the way that those sports and culture intersect. And I think that also gets people excited. So I think tennis is on a really solid path to continue to grow. I think investments from brands are growing, at least certainly from ours, so I'm excited. And if you talk about product, I'm not going to give away anything, but, next year, our season in 2025, for all intents and purposes, I've been at the brand for almost 15 years. 2025, from a product perspective, from Adidas Tennis, is going to be definitely one of the most exciting that I've been a part of. So I give you that because you're going to see some really, really fun stuff.
Cool.
I was just going to ask you, once you get to the U.S. Open, Nathan, what's on your radar? And that was one heck of a tease. It sounds like 2025. And are you talking footwear and fashion, all of it?
I'm talking all of it. And, the one thing is I get the luxury of having a peek behind the curtain way ahead of time. I think we have a 26 meeting here coming up shortly. But what I know, what I've seen, what I've already sold in, if you will, for 2025, front half of the year is really great. And the back half of the year is going to be absolutely fire, as the kids would say.
All right. I think we should leave it right there with a big tease for 25. Nathan, thank you so much for taking some time for our nascent podcast here. We'll make sure we get this out to you. I know our fans love the behind the scenes stuff, so this is going to be quickly devoured by them. Huge. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Love the podcast. Great insight. I appreciate what you said about not being the corporate talking heads pushing tennis out, because there's a lot of them out there. Keep it fun. That's what's going to get people interested in the sport, and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's got to be accessible. I honestly think, college tennis to me is one of the most exciting sports to watch in person.
For sure.
Out there. And if we could bring that energy, almost like that Davis Cup kind of like crazy South American soccer fan in your face, music playing, that will help to, I think, counter and disrupt this country club persona that's existed for so long. So good luck at Adidas, and we'll be cheering for you.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, best of luck in New York.
All right. Take care.
I see ya. U.S. Open.
Yeah, let's get into it. So I think before we talk U.S. Open, let's maybe linger for a moment on the Olympics, because there's some pretty cool stuff that happened. And I think it's going to be a real influence on the Open, especially on the women's side. So
Can I go ahead and just get it off my chest now?
you can. Have you been,
All
you've been
right.
hold, it's this is like about the
All
purse.
right, I'm gonna say this. I can't believe I'm going on the record saying this. I think that Joker
Therapy. This is
deserves all the credit he can get. He's a phenomenal champion as a player. The guy, he's amazing. But I still think he's just a completely unsavory and horrible ambassador for the sport as a whole. I don't think he's attracting people to the sport.
Well, I'll tell you how I feel. And I appreciate your
And
candor.
And I'm trying not to use a lot of flowery language to show how I really feel. But I know, because we talked about this offline, John McEnroe's comments after he won the gold medal, I found unbelievable. About he was sticking up for him and saying, look at all the shit that he
Right.
gets for, being a champion.
For our listeners, during the coverage, I think it was actually at Wimbledon, Chris, where he said,
I don't know if it was at Wimbledon or if it was.
It was at Wimbledon, because there was in the,
Oh, it was- yes,
in the
it was Wimbledon,
semifinal
yes.
match, he was playing, or not the semifinal, maybe it was the quarterfinal against Rune, and everybody was saying, Rune. And he took it as people booing.
And he said,
you
good
know, instead of
night,
rooting
or
for him.
whatever, yeah.
Good night.
Right. And he goes, have a good night. Right. So he was obviously very salty and offended by that. And McEnroe's comment was, I don't see why everybody, hates on him so much. Like, how would you feel if everybody hated on you? And it was strange, because
right.
I mean,
of course,
it's-
McEnroe trying to offer some personal perspective
Yeah.
as somebody who was hated, when in fact he was. I don't feel like McEnroe was hated by Americans so much as he was hated by the British. The British. I mean, I still think. I mean, how long was it before he was allowed to become a member of Wimbledon?
well, he won in '83, I think it was.
Right, but they didn't.
They didn't grant him access.
I don't think they granted him. I think that was part of his legend, is that he wasn't. They didn't really roll the carpet out for him until he had won it a couple times. But
Interesting.
But anyhow, he's not an ambassador for the sport the way that the Williams sisters have been, the way that Kyrgios could be if he could actually win some matches and stay on the court and not talk about it off the court so much. Or even Francis Tiafoe, and I'm picking people of color, but I feel like that's what tennis needs to have to elevate to another level. It's been known, as we were just talking to Nathan, as the country club sport. And the Williams sisters did a phenomenal job of breaking down that stereotype, and I don't see Joker breaking down that stereotype. The guy lives in Monaco and practices on his private court in Monte Carlo. I mean, he's not somebody. I mean, tennis, let's be honest, tennis is not exactly a poor person's sport. We all know that. But at the same time, it has an accessibility to communities the way that many sports don't.
Where did the violin thing stem from? Because he's doing that. That's
His daughter.
signature move
Well,
after-
so I actually got into an argument. My wife and I were talking about this, because I was, of course, looking for any reason to criticize Djokovic. And when we saw that, she said, whoa, wait a minute. That's because his daughter plays the violin and is a reluctant violinist. And he was trying to show her that, okay, it's cool. I'm your dad on center court stroking, my strings here. But I found myself rooting for Djokovic in the Olympics. You can go back, listen to the podcast, listen to the first podcast where we soundly kind of trashed the guy. But man, I mean, to face Nadal in the second round, even though it was Nadal's a shadow of himself, had to be an extremely gratifying win. hurting his knee, again with air quotes, in the semis against Tsitsipas. And then, like by winning that match against Alcaraz, I mean, those two have been the best rivalry the last 2 years. Alcaraz had just given him a complete beatdown 2 weeks prior in Wimbledon. And here he is back at Roland Garros. And he beats him in 2 tiebreakers, hitting just some incredible forehands during the tiebreaker and the one to end the match down the line. Just will be iconic and seen over and over for years. And it cements him as the GOAT, which I think everybody's now, you can't deny him that title. And he joins Graf, Serena, Nadal, and Agassi for winning the Golden Slams. All those 5 players have each won every Grand Slam event and an Olympic gold medal. So, to see him win that in front of his family on that court with his kids, which I know is really important to him, was pretty awesome.
No, I have to give him, it's like I said, I have to give him the credit. I mean, the guy's climbed a pretty big mountain.
Do you think he was being sincere in general? That's his emotionals. I've
No.
never seen him by far.
No.
And I don't know if it was sincere and genuine.
No.
I don't think. I think he's too much of a narcissist to have any sincere feeling.
I disagree.
He was really emotional.
I think he.
I can't say anything else nice about him.
All right, you're in timeout corner. I think it was sincere. I think he really wanted to. Like for him, playing for Serbia is everything, and he's shown that in Davis Cup. And he always shows up for Davis Cup, even if they're playing, like the early rounds against like Ireland or something. Like he plays, right? Most of the other players check in somewhere around the semifinals. So I think consistently he's shown out for his country. And, cheers, a hazy, juice punch, IPA, ching ching to Mr. Djokovic.
Is showing up for how do we feel about Serbia?
That's another podcast.
Yeah. All right. So getting back to the Olympics, on the women's side, Qinwen Zhang, I've worked really hard on that name. Qinwen Zhang beat Iga Świątek on the court where she had just won 4 French Open titles, which was really amazing. I mean, for China, big breakthrough. I mean, think about the impact of China, getting a gold medal in tennis and what the ripple effect for tennis in that country.
Well, do we think that China may have cheated, or is it all legit?
I don't know. I mean, they could cheat, I guess, in any number of ways, but she...
No, but I mean, that's a pretty big win. That's a giant upset.
Massive.
I'm not trying to belittle the athlete, but to beat someone who's won there 4 times previously is a big deal.
Well, but it's like Qinwen, she's top 10. I mean, she's not like out of the top 100.
I've never heard of her.
Well, that's, got to pay closer attention, Chris.
I think I do. I think I need to play much closer
She
attention.
played Donna Vekic in the final, and Vekic is a great story. She's a Croatian player that's been kind of up and down and had a fantastic year. Great match, a lot of drama, 3 sets, so very enjoyable. But for me, the biggest story coming out of Paris, the U.S. women and how each of them, Navarro, Danielle Collins, and Coco, each got into it with their opponents. I mean, Navarro, after the match, losing to Qinwen, said, "I just told her I didn't respect her as a competitor and that she goes about things in a pretty cutthroat way, making for a locker room that doesn't have a lot of camaraderie, so it's tough to face an opponent like that who I really don't respect."
That was a pretty shocking soundbite.
Yeah.
To hear from a player, because we've talked about it on this podcast, how this is a sport where you don't have any separation from your competitors. You're all in the same locker room. You're hanging out. You've known these people for years, oftentimes. You've been playing against them for years in many cases. You've probably had maybe the same coach at some point, or you've shared the same training camp or the same training intensive at some location. It's not like, it's similar to skiing probably, where you have, but even then it's a little bit different because in skiing you have teams and you have, people that tend to, ski with one sponsor, sort of travel together, and so forth. You're all on your own in tennis. So being in a locker room with people that you are vocal enough, or I should say, to be vocal enough about someone that you dislike to the media in that sport, that's interesting.
What's going on with Coco?
Man, she's struggling right now. I mean, she's lost the round of 16, I think, the last 3 tournaments, including most recently at the Olympics, losing to Vekic, and in Canada.
Was that the meltdown match with Vekic?
That was the meltdown, the second time she melted down there, where she went off on the chair umpire for a call that was ultimately correct. It was made correct. She argued that the lines person had made the call prematurely, disrupting her shot
During the point.
During the point.
I thought that was efficient error.
No,
It wasn't. Oh, wow.
They were right. And it kind of points out or underscores the need for VR, right, that they have in soccer, in tennis, because it's immediate, you're done, and then all this emotion comes out of the game, right?
It's also not, it's a very, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's a much more, putting the cameras on those lines is not a, I mean, the technology's been there for years.
Yeah. No. But maybe the best was our girl Danimal, who after her match against Freitag walked around the net to get in her face and put her finger in her chest and basically, tell her that, I don't need the fakeness. That was her line, calling out her opponent for feigning injury, getting off the court after she was unintentionally hit by a return. But when I texted my mom about this and sent her the story, her only response was, meow.
Oh, wow. Now, wait, did Sabalenka compete in the Olympics, or was she?
No, she's been out since
she's been out
before the French, or maybe I think since the French.
But she's just taking time off. She didn't
hurt. She's injured.
She is injured.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, what did she do?
She's played.
I was watching her like joking around with Ons Jabeur, practicing for whatever tournament it was, and then all of a sudden she bowed out.
Yeah.
She played the DC Open where she lost in the semis. That was her first tournament back. And then in Canada, she lost in the quarters. So, not bad. She's finding her form again. But as someone who's been in the finals the last 2 times at the U.S. Open, she'll be ready. She's going to be very comfortable there. And
so you think she was just putting it aside to get prepared for the...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and then on the other hand, you've got former champion Naomi Osaka, who's ranked 95 in the world. She's working her way back, but she had an early loss in Toronto. She lost in qualifying in Cincinnati a couple days ago to an unknown American, Ashlyn Kruger, and then wrote this really long kind of tweet on X about where her head is right now, and it's definitely experiencing some postpartum depression. So it's, the issue comes back again for her, which is sad. I hope she gets over that. We really are missing her at the moment.
You think she'll play in the U.S. Open?
Oh, absolutely. She'll get a wild card. I don't think she'll have to qualify. And I think if she gets out of a round or two, kind of like Serena, who'd always get, some wild cards. Like if the worst thing you can possibly imagine as an opponent is seeing either one of them in the second week of a tournament, because that means they're ready and they've kind of played their way into form. But I think she'll be there.
Well, before you get too far into that, while we're on mental health, has anybody seen any footage or any comments from Rublev today after he lost his match against Popyrin at the Montreal Open?
I have not seen. I watched the match, and he has a few outbursts, but Popyrin was just like blew him off the court. I mean,
it's straight sets.
Yeah.
But Rublev, I mean, do we need to put him on some kind of suicide watch? Like, guys, he's really like, I'm worried about him.
Yeah, no, he's openly struggling and is very forthright in battles.
Yeah, what did he do at Wimbledon so that he wouldn't get fined? He was hitting his hand with his racket.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of footage of him like where he's tearing up knuckles and knees with his strings.
But he wouldn't slam his racket on the court because he didn't want to get...
He didn't want to damage it, yeah.
He didn't want to... Well, no, he didn't want to get the judgment from the line judge or whatever.
Yeah. No, we love some Rublev. I mean, the guy's a battler, but I don't think he's going to contend.
Mental
He
tomato.
just can't seem to crack the final of any of these major events.
It's amazing. The guy's an incredible tennis player. Has he ever won a final?
Sure. He's won some events, just not slams. Mm-mm.
Right. This Montreal Open, that's not a slam. That's just an event.
Nah, that's a 1,000.
It's a pretty big event, though.
It is. It's you know what? It's the longest running tournament other than Wimbledon.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Maybe they should sponsor the podcast. They probably had more discussion in the past 2 minutes than they have in 20 years.
We're going to get my pen pal from X, formerly known as Twitter, Stephanie, who's a tennis journalist in Canada. We're going to get her on the podcast, and I think she'll actually be able to educate us quite a bit. But looking ahead, I always like to take a peek at the gambling lines. Carlos, Djokovic, Sinner are far and away the men's favorites at plus 130, plus 185, and 220 right now.
I'm going to make a prediction right now.
Let's hear it.
Yannick Sinner is going to take the Open.
You think so?
Yeah. I think his size, his height, and he's had some rest.
He has had rest. But he's had some injuries, too. He just lost in Montreal because he's kind of banged up. His hip's still bother him. So
I think Joker, you're going to see a very sharp decline from now until whenever he decides to bow out. I think he's basically accomplished his goals. But I would say the Open's going to be Carlos and Yannick.
T. Fritz.
It could be. Man, he's at plus 3,600. There's some good value there. I also think, and not just because we had Nathan from Adidas on, but Zverev at plus 1,800. That guy's playing some incredible tennis right now.
There.
And then there's always Berrettini. Berrettini's back from a couple years of injury at plus 4,700. You got to throw a little bit of coin on that.
I like Berrettini.
And the women, it's, Swiatek and Sabalenka, both at plus 300.
It's where it's at for the better viewing, honestly. The women's right now, it's incredible.
It is a better for the drama, and certainly, if you get a match where you've got Vekic against Coco or any of these American women that were in the Olympics,
it's the toss-up.
It's must-see TV.
Well, it's just a toss-up.
Yeah.
You really don't know who's going to take it.
I would love to see Danielle Collins go deep. That would be, talk about something that would be great for tennis. I mean, she plays like somebody that if you just threw her on the screen in front of a non-tennis fan, they'd be like, I dig the Danimal.
Right.
And it's her last Open ever. It's her last season. So I expect big things from her.
I don't think I would love to put a whole lot of weight and make some huge statement about Navarro, but I don't think she's quite there yet with her game.
I like Ons Jabeur. I hope she gets her act together a little bit. That's my best.
She just pulled out of Cincinnati. Yeah.
She did.
She did. She's got some injuries she's working through, but she'll be at the Open, I think.
What's the name of the Wimbledon winner from last year? The women's Wimbledon winner.
Vondrousova?
Vondrousova, yeah.
She's kind of a one-hit wonder. I mean,
is that
when you've got like the stick and poke tattoos, you got to wonder like what's the trajectory?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask like no one's talked about her at all.
Because she hasn't won anything. And she lost like in the first round, I think, this past year.
All right, so do we want to now talk about the Russian mafia's involvement in tennis or something, or what?
If we'd like to survive. I don't think we will.
I'm sorry, but your podcast is done now.
You break your bones, you don't win. You cover spread.
You don't talk about Vondrousova like that. No, never. No stick and poke.
Well, to our listeners, make sure that you don't forget to subscribe to the Breaking Back podcast. And while you're at it, download your favorite episodes to take with you wherever you go. Your support means the world to Chris, Peter, and me. So thank you for being part of our growing Breaking Back community. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe to Breaking Back on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to follow us on X and Instagram at Breaking Back Pod.